Now, as the book said, and again, if you go to Table 6.1 on page 161, there are essentially three broad categories of motives for diversification. You should understand these and understand which ones are good and which ones are bad. And they do go from good to neutral to bad. Let's just go through them very quickly here, which you should understand what they are and why some are good and some aren't. First, there are value-creating motives for diversification, and some examples of these are economies of scope. This is where you have the capacity to share resources across or competencies across your organization amongst diversified companies. Market power, this is basically your fundamental capacity to be big in the marketplace. And financial economies, and this is where you can improve your efficiency in terms of capital allocation or restructuring within your portfolio of businesses. These are all good reasons to be diversified. And this is on the continuum of the three types. This is the type of rationale for diversification that you should be striving for. There are also value neutral reasons for diversification. Book provides a list of them. Examples are, meeting some legal requirement, tax savings, management of risk, management of resources. Those are all, value neutral in the sense that they don't create additional value like the previous group. They're not inherently bad, but there may be perfectly good reasons to diversify, but they fall in the middle category. The last group, and this is as I said, the bad motives, bad managerial motives, are the value-reducing motives, which can include management deciding they want to diversify their managerial employment risk. Basically, by having a larger organization, they preserve job security, or they increase their compensation. Broader scope means bigger pay, whether or not there's really a need for diversification. This is an inherently bad and probably unethical set of reasons to consider diversifying your organization. So, in addition to understanding sort of the three major areas or three major issues of diversification, motives for diversification, you need to understand that diversification does not always improve performance for companies. As the book indicated, research suggests that high levels of diversification may actually hurt performance. So you may have unreasonable motives to proceed with a diversification strategy, and that's the value losing motives. You may also have value neutral motives, but to the extent that you over diversify, performance may be hurt. So you have to really think long and hard about whether it does make sense to diversify. As the book indicated, and this is an important concept that you ought to be able to articulate in an exam or in your materials, there's a curvilinear relationship between the level of diversification and performance. There was a chart in the book that sort of demonstrated this, and fundamentally a dominant business model is typically less value oriented than a related constrained business model, but that model is actually better than unrelated. So being over diversified actually can have a negative effect on the performance of a company. So this concept is important as you evaluate some of the companies in either case analyses for the team project, case analyses for the final exam, or more generally in our online discussions. You should understand this relationship to performance and level of diversification, because it may help you make a determination about whether you should or should not continue an effort to diversify a company. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about M&A, which is my specialty, and I think I won't get into this in great detail now, but one indication of how over-diversification can create challenges for companies is in the context of M&A, mergers and acquisitions. There are a variety of studies and a variety of books that suggest that only about 1 in 10 acquisitions are accretive to the acquiring party. Accretive means creates value, creates value for the company, and so if M&A is that unsuccessful, one of the driving factors is that, in fact, higher diversification can sometimes have an inverse effect in terms of positive impact on the bottom line and the overall value of the combined entities. For a little bit more discussion of this concept, please look at the eBay Skype example on page 174, and I think they describe some of the challenges there. One of the expectations when you do M&A is that there's going to be synergy. That is, somehow by putting the two pieces together, you'll either increase value in terms of greater output, or you'll increase value because of greater efficiency, like expense savings, etc. In practice, my experience as an M&A specialist is that synergy is an overrated concept, and multiple businesses typically don't create a great deal of synergy without an extraordinary amount of effort to manage, whether it's manage expenses or manage the combined benefits of a group of business units. And that literally brings us to the end of the highlights of corporate level strategy. I guess a couple of just quick summary comments. First, I would encourage you to look at figure 6.4 on page 178. It does provide a reasonable map of the notion of corporate level strategies. It in a single illustration, you see the impact of value creating, value neutral, and value reducing influences on strategy. It talks a bit about capital markets impact, which I did not discuss today, but there is some on that in the chapter that I would encourage you to look at. Talks about some of the mechanics of internal governance, and then what a diversification, how all those pieces come together to create a diversification strategy, which ultimately has an outcome in the form of the firm's. Probably the overarching theme to remember when you look at this table or think about this chapter at all is that diversification only improves firm performance when it's at the appropriate level, and that's tied to the given resources, capabilities, and core competencies of the firm, and it's tied to the external environmental opportunities and threats. So diversification isn't something one does, a firm does just for the sake of doing it. You really need to evaluate the capacity of the firm to take on the diversification and understand the external inputs that may impact the ability of the firm to operate with a diversified strategy. So those are some of the steps on corporate level strategy. Again, based on your feedback, my focus was just on highlighting some key elements, some things I think you ought to be thinking about. I would encourage you to read the full chapter. It, I think, is relatively straightforward at the outset and relatively easy to get through.